All right, everybody, welcome back to the album review series we go through here. And if you caught last time when we took a look at just the one and done, one off Temple of the Dog self-titled album review, then you know exactly who we're covering. We're delving into a pretty bulky discography, counting an EP in there and a cover album. I think we're looking at like 13 albums, something like that. And of course, that is none other than Metallica, and that means we're starting off with none other than the debut, Kill 'Em All, a straight up thrash metal classic, dropped in 1983. We've got, of course, James Hetfield on rhythm guitar and vocals, Lars Ulrich on drums, Kirk Hammett lead guitars, and Cliff Burton on bass. And there's a shot, look how young these guys were. I mean, it's like, man, crazy. How they just dropped this album at such a young age. And I gotta say, as a whole, this album, which it's been quite some time since I've listened to it all the way through, and, I'm like, damn, maybe I need to start listening to this thing more than I, used to it, more than I do maybe some other albums in there. So we'll have to see how that goes when we end up ranking all these things, but, yeah, I don't know why. It's just been quite some time. I was drawn to other albums of theirs I've been listening to. Of course, in between, like months and months ago, because I've known I was going to do theirs. So I took a good break from listening to their stuff for a little while here, in preparation for this. But this album as a whole, I'm like, damn, I forgot just how damn good it is. And we kick it off with Hit the Lights. And just a fast-paced thrash classic album opener. Can't really go wrong here. Just it's a quick, speedy track, kind of lets you know how this thing is going to be. This thing's got that raw production in it, that really garagey feel. And the production kind of reminds me of Slayer's first album, Show No Mercy. Very, very similar production. They're both even kind of have the same color schemes on their albums here with like the, reds and whites and blacks on there, but Hit the Lights is a perfect, like, hey, jump right to the gun, let's get to it. And then we go to the second track, which is one of my favorite damn tracks off here. Four Horsemen, which, if you're a Metallica fan and or Megadeth fan, you know that Dave Mustaine was in the band prior to Kirk Hammett joining. And he would end up getting kicked out of the band before the album would actually release, and so they would go in and just re-record all his parts that he did for the album, Kirk would. So, I mean, there's Dave Mustaine's fingerprints all over this thing, and Four Horsemen is one of them. He even did on Megadeth's debut album, pretty much a sped-up version of the track, and I think with some different lyrics and stuff, called Mechanics, which is really cool. And I kind of go back and forth on which one I like better, but maybe it's just recency bias, but, after delving into this thing again, I'm leaning more towards the Four Horsemen. The breakdown in this thing is just phenomenal. And we're looking at a 7-minute and 8-second track, so this kind of shows those epics that these guys can really go into and get a little more progressive in some of their music writing. I mean, it's still straight up thrash metal, but they've got some lengthier ones and show, with this track, that, hey, we can get a little complicated in here, too, with some pretty crazy time changes and everything, some really cool breakdowns. Cliff Burton's bass is absolutely killer during that breakdown. He's just known for that stuff. Then we go on to Motor Breath, another really solid one. Another one you just really can't go wrong with here. I'm trying to see if that would maybe be one of my least favorites. In fact, the one I kind of skipped over it, but I would probably say one of my least favorites off here is Hit the Lights, even though that is like the perfect opener for this thing. Like, don't get me wrong, it's an awesome song. That's just a testament to, to this album. How awesome and great of a debut it is, how historical of an album it is. But Hit the Lights is probably my least favorite. It's just the least memorable to me out of a lot of these other ones. But yeah, Motor Breath, track number 3. Another killer one that you just can't go wrong with. I love that riff. Speaking of riffs, I'm loving this Jump in the Fire, track number 4. That riff is just Just nasty stuff, man. One of my favorite riffs off this album. And I would even go as far as say that this is some of Kirk Hammett and James Hetfield, both of their best guitar playing. I mean, they're going insanely fast. And just extremely just technical, noodling around, just going nuts on this thing. And I love it, love it, love it. This is easily Metallica's heaviest album out of their discography, just bar none. And Jump in the Fire is just another one of those. It's just a really, really fantastic track that's up there as one of my favorites. Then we go with these guys' first instrumental here, Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth. And this is the first of, these kind of Cliff Burton bass bass-led instrumentals, bass solos, and just love it, man. Love it. I forgot how good this one was. And, it doesn't quite this one isn't quite as complicated as we'll see with some of the later, kind of instrumentals that go on here. But, I mean, this is a really cool one. It's kind of like the eruption on this album, like comparing that to like Van Halen, their first album. Eddie Van Halen's going to show off with his crazy solo, all this crazy stuff on Eruption. And that's kind of what Cliff's doing here on bass. And there's just like, I love Cliff Burton's bass tone. The multiple bass tones he can kind of, encompass. And like this one in particular, it's kind of like similar to like the bass tone he has on For Whom the Bell Tolls, where it's kind of like that muddy, just kind of really distorted and fuzzy, bass tone. And he's just playing phenomenally fast, crazy stuff that's just, I mean, if you didn't know any better, you might think it was a damn guitar. He's like shredding on this thing, and one of my favorite bass players of all time, probably my top 10. And it's for innovating and doing stuff like that. Then we close out side one with an all-time Metallica classic, Whiplash, and this one's still one of my favorites off here. Always has been one of my favorites. Just such a big, impactful, classic thrash track. I love the little break in between where he says Whiplash, just the drums going on here. Lars just killing it. Gets a lot of flack, but man, if I think it's pretty much just like a meme to give Lars shit on his drumming. I think he's a pretty awesome drummer. He's not, anywhere probably even near my top 20, if I'm being honest, but I think he's a great drummer, especially like this early stuff. Then we hop on over to track number 2, and I forgot about how awesome this track was, but Phantom Lord, another one of my favorites. I mean, another one that's got one of these crazy breakdowns that I just love when these guys do, and that's Cliff Burton for you. He was definitely, you could tell, like even after his death and everything, and when the songwriting kind of changed, he was one of their main songwriters, and you can really tell because he was really into those like just crazy epic breakdowns that kind of take place in here. And Phantom Lord indeed has one of those. Then we go to No Remorse. Probably that probably ranked kind of low for me as far as my favorites go, but I do really dig it. Another really just fast-paced, kick-ass thrash tune that not one of my favorites of the many awesome tracks on here. Then you go with Seek and Destroy, all-time classic. Man, that riff is like, just it embeds into your freaking soul, man. That's one of the best damn thrash riffs and just riffs of all time. So hooky, and this one's got such a cool groove to it. I love the solo that Kirk whips out in this one, and then it kicks right back in with that riff. Seek and Destroy has always been a all-time classic off this album and out of their discography, period. So I've always really, really loved that one. One of my favorites. Then we close it on out with Metal Militia. Another one that kind of I'd maybe rank down a little bit lower as far as my favorites go. But again, this is all great stuff on here, front to back. So it's still a badass tune and a solid closer. So yeah, no surprise here that this is an amazing album and one of the greatest debuts out there. Very historical landmark of an album that really innovated and helped, kick into gear the thrash scene that was kind of going on underground and everything. You could say that about like Exodus, Bonded in Blood, and Slayer Show No Mercy. There's plenty of bands that were, getting involved in that and kind of really pushing this stuff to the forefront. And Metallica were one of those, and just a fantastic album. For whatever reason, I just hadn't listened to this one in a long time, even like before getting, prepared by taking a break from their discography or anything. For whatever reason, I just hadn't listened to this one all the way through in quite a long time. So it was no surprise to me that was amazing, because I've always loved it, but I just ended up loving it and appreciating it like to, a whole nother degree. Coming back to it and revisiting it all the way through and really getting into some of these deep cuts here, like Phantom Lord and, the Four Horsemen, stuff like that. And Pulling Teeth. So, I mean, just absolute amazing debut album. I'm sure I'm going to probably get a lot of folks agreeing with me down there in those comments when we talk about this thing and how freaking great this thing is. But if you're not a fan of that, I totally feel you. It's all good. Just let us know. I mean, it'd be kind of interesting to hear, everyone's thoughts on this thing, and hear, if anybody has any stories of like them had the first time they heard this thing or anything, and kind of what it did. Anybody, especially anybody who was around during the release of this thing, kind of how it was influencing the metal scene. So yeah, we can talk about this thing down there in the comments, and of course, next time we're going to take a look at Ride the Lightning. Another, these guys were on an absolute roll in the 80s. So, very, very exciting stuff. Sorry, guys, my voice is going out a little bit on me. Worked in a haunted house all this past month, so kind of going out on me, but we're going to keep going. Regardless, and now that all that's over, we should be coming back to me. But, yeah, guys, Ride the Lightning will be coming up next. Super, super hyped to go into Metallica's discography. They have a very wide variety of sounding albums, especially when we get into some like the 90s, 2000s type stuff. So it'll be really interesting to see how these kind of all stack up together. But let's talk about Kill 'Em All down there in the comments. Like, subscribe, and comment. Next time we will look at Ride the Lightning. Thanks, guys.